Good evening, and thank you for joining us for the 13th of 19 candidate forums for the 2021 general elections in the Cayman Islands, being hosted by the Cayman Islands Chamber of Commerce in association with Foster's. My name is Mike Gibbs, and I have the honor of being the current president of the Chamber of Commerce. I will also be one of the panelists asking the questions this evening, along with Mr. Chris Duggan, a past president of the Chamber. I'd like to begin my opening comments by welcoming West Bay West candidate, Mr. Mario Ebanks, and thanking him for accepting the Chamber's invitation to participate in this forum. Fellow candidate Makiva Bush did not accept our invitation. Mr. Ebanks, your willingness to appear on tonight demonstrates to voters that you take the democratic process seriously and are ready to respond to a series of questions on the top issues as identified by a recent online chamber survey. More than 400 responses and more than 200 questions have been submitted via that survey, and these will help to frame the questions for this evening's forum. There's certainly not enough time to ask all the questions, but we will do our best to cover the topics that have been identified as the most important to the Cayman Islands and the West Bay West constituency. When the Chamber was established in 1965, the goal was to create an organization that supports, promotes, and protects the interest and welfare of its members and the wider community. Being nonpartisan, we have hosted forums every election year since the 1988 election. So for 9 elections, we have provided members of the community with an opportunity to hear from their candidates and educate themselves before Election Day. These forums have taken weeks of planning and preparation, with all the credit going to the hardworking Chamber staff, but would not have been possible without the financial support of our sponsors: Foster's, Affinity Recruitment, Bodden's Legal and Corporate, and DART, so a very big thank you to them. I would also like to extend a wholehearted thanks to our media partners: Cayman Mile Road, Cayman Life TV, Radio Cayman, Government Information Services, and ICCI FM, for agreeing to broadcast tonight's forum. It is the first time that we have live streamed the forums on the internet, and we hope that this new format will enable even more people to watch them in the comfort of your home. It is now time to begin this evening's forum. I will therefore turn the proceedings over to Mr. Will Pinot, CEO of the Chamber, who will serve as this evening's moderator. He will explain the rules of the forum and introduce tonight's West Bay West candidates.
Good evening, Mr. Ebanks.
Good evening, Will.
Rules for tonight's forum are as follows. You'll be asked a series of questions, and you'll have 2 minutes to respond to each if you choose to do so. And at the conclusion of the forum, you'll be allowed 2.5 minutes for a closing statement. Now I'm going to read a brief biography of our candidate, Mr. Mario Ebanks. As an 8th-generation Caymanian, Mr. Ebanks has always been a keen advocate and servant leader, working effectively for various community and public policy advocacy initiatives. He holds a bachelor's degree in business administration with a major in international finance and marketing, a minor in economics and public affairs, and a master's degree in business administration. He was the first Caymanian manager of the Cayman Islands Chamber of Commerce in the late 1980s, the youngest country manager within ESSO Caribbean and Central America in the early 1990s, and a senior assistant permanent secretary in the Ministry of Community Development in the late 1990s. He served as the first director of labor and pensions, and until putting his personal interests and career on hold to run, he was the chief human resources officer at the Cayman Islands Airports Authority. A man of Christian faith with an impeccable record of integrity and adherence to family values, he has a proven track record in senior responsible roles in both the private and public sectors as a community volunteer and advocate. He was a past president and founding member of the Overseas Students Association and the Cayman Islands Society for the Human Resource Professionals, as well as past president of Rotary Club of Grand Cayman Central and Junior Achievement. Welcome, Mr. Ebanks.
Thank you very much.
We're going to take a short commercial break, and when we return, we begin the questioning for this evening. Please stay tuned.
Behind everything we do is a promise. Better. Better because we care, because we all have a common goal: to be better at cooking, to be better at eating right and taking care of ourselves, to live in a better community, to just feel better. Today and tomorrow and the next day. Do it for you. Do it for them. Do it to prove something to yourself. Do it to carry on a family recipe. Or just because. But when you aim for the stars, better just works. We're Fosters. And we're better. Because of you, because of them, because of this place. And because we care.
Welcome back to the Chamber of Commerce Candidates Forum for West Bay West. Now turning over to President of the Chamber, Mike Gibbs, to begin the first round of questioning.
Thank you, Will. And again, good evening, Mr. Ebanks. Welcome.
Evening. Thank you.
First question. Why have you decided to run in this year's election, and what qualities do you possess that make you the candidate of choice for West Bay West?
Thank you very much, President Mike. Good evening, everybody. I thank you for the opportunity to be here. As the manager of the Chamber of Commerce in 1988, when the Candidates Forums begun, I'm happy to be here 33 years later and 9 elections later and being a candidate in this forum. I am running in this election with a number of objectives in mind. I have 40 years of professional experience as well as being a servant leader, as Will just mentioned in your introduction. And one of my reasons for running is that the track record of my opponent is such that I don't know how many times he expects to breach the public trust and to get reelected. And I believe that also in this election, character is on the ballot. Decency is on the ballot. Integrity is on the ballot. And ethics is on the ballot. So I am here today after my opponent has been removed from Executive Council and Cabinet twice. My primary objective and my committee is to remove him from the House of Parliament. That's our objective. And aside from that, the second and equally important reason for my candidacy is that COVID-19 allows us the opportunity to reset, to press the reset, and to look at building a better future for these islands. I want to be at the table. I want to be at the table negotiating the future of this country. And I believe with my qualifications, with my various certifications and designations, my experience in senior roles in the public and private sector, I can work with all sides. I can also work with all demographics and all cultures. I believe I'm an excellent project manager. I can get things done. I work easy with people. I'm a good, easy person to work with. And as you mentioned, a Christian, ethical individual, a good family man. I love my people and I want to serve them.
Great. Thank you very much, Mr. Ebanks. And before I ask the next question, I'll add my welcome to you and good evening.
Thank you, Chris.
So the next question is addressing West Bay West issues. What do you consider to be the most immediate need for West Bay West? And how would you intend to address this need if elected?
The needs of West Bay West are no different from the needs of West Bay in general. But West Bay West in particular, we have coastline, on our West Point Road in particular, that the view of the ocean, the beautiful ocean, is becoming eroded because of large buildings and tall buildings. And also there's a couple of beach accesses there that are totally inaccessible. I believe that we need to look at a development plan that's going to look at all those issues. West Bay West, there's no hurricane shelter. And so we live close to the coast part of West Bay West. If there is a hurricane or a major disaster, the people have nowhere to run if their homes are not able to sustain them. The other area is family and community. There's a growing population. Young people are at risk. We have a situation where children are going to school without proper meals and nutrition. I believe that all of those issues are those that impact all of West Bay. But West Bay West in particular, I've gone to areas, Chris, where people are living in their boats on dry land. People are barely getting by. People have low wages and they have difficulty getting jobs. Those are the kind of issues that inspire me to be a candidate. West Bay West is a wonderful area. It's very diverse, actually. It covers a broad demographic of people, different incomes, wonderful people. I really have enjoyed, not just in this election, but for the last 20 years. I lived in West Bay West for the last 28 years with my wife. Enjoyed the people there. I want to serve them. I want to work with them. I want to create a district council where we can work together, empower people, and build a better West Bay West.
Thank you.
I'll give you a second to grab your take a breath before we pass the next question.
I appreciate that.
Moving from West Bay West to more national issues, apart from reopening of our borders, what are the top two national issues that you intend to raise with the new government and hope to achieve during the next 4 years if elected?
In regard to opening of the borders, thank God our country is safe. We have a good partnership with the UK and with our private sector and public sector in relation to the vaccine program. I believe that we need to open our tourism industry safely, and that means that we have to have the vaccine program that provides 70 to 75% vaccinations for all eligible individuals. But I believe also that in regard to the other issues facing our country, as I mentioned in the outset, we need to also look at where we want to be in the future. And so in my plan, in my manifesto, and the manifesto of my committee, we have something called Vision 2050. You know, we had Vision 2008 years ago. I'm looking at Vision 2050, where we look at all of the aspects of development. Population, environment, culture, commerce, immigration, population, everything else. Pull it all together, right? So we need to have a proper development plan for the country. There's no need of there's no good of reopening the economy and continuing the same way we were before COVID. Because before COVID, we were reaching the melting point in many areas. So we need to plan, and we need to take a step back and say, where do we want to be? What do the children want us to do? What is the sustainable development of this country and growth management? So safely opening the economy, long-term planning, and also looking at our constitution. I believe that we need to ensure that we get people who are moving into government and don't expect to be there for a lifetime. And my proposal would be to have a limited term of 20 years where individuals can serve no more than 20 years as a member of parliament. Right now we have an 8-year term for the premier, but limited term is very important. And as I mentioned before, family and community empowerment is important. If we're not careful, the new generation coming up, if they lose hope, we're going to have a very, very bad country. We have a beautiful country. So family and community empowerment, national planning, growth management, and safely reopening our economy is a good recipe for moving forward for a better Cayman Islands. And if you elect me, I commit to that objective.
Thank you.
Right. The next question is again on a national issue, and that's education and what your vision for education is. So what is your vision for a successful education system in Cayman? What does it look like? What steps can we take to get there? And how will that success be measured?
That's a very good question. I served as a member of the Education Council for a number of years. I also served on the Community College Board of Governors for a number of years, and the ICCI Board of Trustees for a number of years. And as Will mentioned, I was also a founding member of an organization called the Overseas Students Association. That was a group of people that were university students that came back and formed an association. So I love the subject of education. It's a difficult area, of course, and it's very complex and has many tentacles. But some of the areas that I would like to address in education is that we have to look at discipline and misbehavior and bullying in our schools. When I walk around West Bay West, some parents tell me that they're scared about their children going to school, and especially now you're having the younger children mixing with the older ones. We have to address that. Class sizes, the sizes of classes, we have to make sure that those are reasonable. And I think that also the current Minister of Education keeps talking about it, and she's doing something towards it as well, but ensuring that teachers are paid well and are supported and have proper conditions and have support. Not just support from government, but support from the parents as well. Because teachers are those that build society, build future generations, and we've got to make sure that they are taken care of. Early childhood education, early detection of learning disabilities. This is very critical. If you've got children, like you don't know whether they have learning disabilities and they're misbehaving in school, but they're not properly assessed as to what the issues are, you can't address it, and then also it ends up that their future is compromised because they can't compete. Adult education is another area that I'm looking at in terms of our education plan. And finally, schools integration. Mixing nationalities is a healthy thing. We have to have the space to do it, and we have to make sure that we use those facilities properly. But integrating schools is a proposal in my plan that I'm going to talk about a lot. I think it has a lot of value, and it's going to be part of my education agenda for this country.
Great. Thank you very much.
Staying on more national issues, talking about benefits and the potential reform, pensions and health insurance reform are top issues being discussed by many candidates during this year's election campaigns. What is your position on the subject of that reforms, and what reforms would you support if elected?
Thank you, Mike. That is a good question. I've been championing pensions and health insurance for most of my working life. And as you all know, I was a Director of Labour and Pensions from 2012 to 2015. And before that, from 1995 to 1997, I was the Secretary of the Pension Plan Advisory Committee under the Ministry of Community Development, who came up with the concept of private sector pensions, the legislation and the regulations. I believe that pension reform requires looking at the regulations. The investment regulations in particular are woefully inadequate. They're out of date. And for the last 10 years, we've been promising to revise them, and we haven't. Looking at the contribution rate of pensions, 10% was what was done in 1998. And firms like Towers Perrin and others who have done work, and Mercer who have done work, consultancy, have said that it should be more like 20%. It hasn't increased. We've got to look at that. No. There's going to be a discussion about it, but we need to look at it. We also need to look at the investment criteria and getting proper resources for the pension enforcement. I believe also that during my time, we did a multi-agency cooperation. So pensions, cooperating with work, cooperating with the Health Insurance Commission, cooperating with the Department of Trade, so that you have enforcement, so that people who are not paying their pension or health insurance are not also getting work permits. So you have an interrelationship between the two. And I think also that the pensions is something that we need. We just recently took out $450 million out of the pensions in this country. That's a short-term gain, but I think it'll be long-term pain. But we need to work on this whole thing because we have no income tax or social security in this country. So we need to have pensions that are efficient, providing a good retirement for our people. And I'm committed to addressing the pension because I know how to do it. And we can work and get it done properly and not just promise, but do it.
Well, thank you. We've gone through the first 5 questions. And right now at this time, we're going to take a short commercial break. And we return the second round of questions right after this break. Welcome back to the Chamber of Commerce Candidates Forum for West Bay West. I'll now turn it over to past President Chris Duggan for the next round of questions.
Great. Thank you, Will. So the next question is going back to the district and the subject of district advisory councils. What is your view about establishing a district advisory council? Explain if you do intend to establish one if elected. And if yes, please explain the process you will use to establish the council and the role that the council will play in West Bay West.
Thank you, Chris. I support the district councils. They are now a creature of legislation. I think we have to do it. The district councils or constituency councils I am not 100% sure whether we should have one for every electoral area, because you'll have 19 throughout the country. It may be that we need to have them during the geographic districts rather than the electoral districts. I'm not sure about that. I have to think about that a bit more. But in terms of how to structure it, is that it needs to be done democratically. We can't have the government appointing people to be in the council. It has to be done democratic. The district councils are supposed to be the ones that advise the MPs in that district or in that constituency. It allows people to feel empowered. It allows people to be involved. It also allows succession planning. I plan to be, if I'm elected on the 14th of April of this year, I plan to serve no more than 8 years. If they want me beyond that, then we can talk. But my wife says 8 years. So a district council allows for succession. We can find people within the district council who want to be MPs, and they can be mentored to move into that role in the future. Under my plan, we're going to put in place a new law, a new act called a Family and Communities Empowerment Act. That act will look at building the community, looking at youth, looking at we have a law in the books now called the Towns and Communities Law, which is outdated, it's 1965, I think, law. We're going to bring all that in, update that, look at families, look at parental responsibility, look at the issue of deadbeat dads, look at the area of learning and development and parental skills and community needs in terms of music, noise, zoning and everything. District councils within that kind of framework can then be the people on the ground that are managing our districts and being empowered. And the MPs, let me tell you, an MP who has to deal with the big issues and also be on the ground doing all these things, that person has to be a magician. So we need to have individuals who are on the ground advising and dealing with the district issues and helping to run the country. But they need to be recognized, and they need to be elected democratically, and they need to be empowered. And district councils, by an election, will empower them and will give them opportunity to move into other areas of service.
Great. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Moving on for the next question into the area of development concessions. And the question is, do you support the current system of negotiating incentives with developers when considering large-scale developments? If yes, why do you support that system? If no, what other ideas would you recommend?
If my opponent was in this debate tonight, I would ask him, what is your position on that? What is your position on that? My position is simply that development concessions or fees are things that are on the books right now. We have the infrastructure impact fee framework, and we have an environmental impact fee framework. That is meant to give government some revenue that large developers contribute to the coffers, and that revenue is meant to deal with things like infrastructure, social services, environmental protection, and the like. I believe that it needs to be structured carefully in regulations. No more should we have this sort of gray area where people go into behind closed doors and negotiate these sweetheart deals, and the public doesn't hear about it. And when they hear about it, we realize that we have left so much money on the table that could have been invested in our young people, in our education system. So I believe that right now in this country, in these islands, we have the construction industry is mushrooming, it's ballooning. If you look from the West Bay Cemetery, West Bay Road, to the Georgetown Cemetery, you probably count 8 large cranes and 10, 12-story buildings being done in some cases. That's good in a sense, but who are we developing for? We need to have the developers and investors contribute towards our country, contribute towards infrastructure and environment, contribute towards social welfare so that their investments are also protected because they're building a better country. And giving them all these sweetheart deals and concessions at this time, at this particular time, when the country can be selective, is irresponsible, reckless, and I want to say that there's other words I could use, but I would prefer to have it where it's structured in regulations, it's clear what it is, investors know what it is, and if they want to come, they have to pay those fees. If not, they can go somewhere else, or they can go another part of the island, or they can go to the sister islands, providing it's responsible development. But this thing about sweetheart deals, I'm not for it. I am for promoting sustainable growth, not long-term gain. Short-term gain for long-term gain. I'm here about the long-term best interests of these islands.
Thank you.
Great. We'll let you get a sip of water there. But the next question is going to get your views on a potential ministerial position if elected. The question is, would you accept a ministerial position in the new government if one was offered to you? And if yes, which ministry do you feel best suits your skills and your qualifications?
Chris, if elected, I should say when elected. I like to say if, but people say I should say when. I am prepared to be Premier, Deputy Premier, Minister, MP, Parliamentary Secretary, or whatever the public wants me to do or what the House wants me to do. If, in terms of a ministry, I have had such a broad exposure in many areas in the public and private sector and so many different industries that I could take a number of those ministries. But the one that I really would love to serve in, where I think I can offer benefits and contribution in the shortest time possible, because we don't have a lot of time. I only have 8 years, and I want to do as much as I can in 8 years, God's willing, is the area of labor or employment relations, human capital development, and commerce. I have been the Director of Labor and Pensions. I have been an advocate for labor and for the working man for a long time. I am an HR professional, and I have always had a great interest and commitment in the area of training and human capital development. So that would include work and immigration as it is now. Labor would include the existing Labor Department, and also commerce, which would be the Department of Commerce and Investment, because I like business. I've been a Chamber of Commerce manager. I understand business. I understand what makes things work. The last thing you need is somebody who is going to get in there and just be a bureaucrat, or somebody who's not going to look and have an open mind. But West Bay needs a minister, at least one minister, maybe two. But my opponent, he says he only wants to be a speaker. I want to be a minister. I want to work. And I hope that if we can get seats in West Bay West, West Bay North, and West Bay West, maybe have two ministers, but at least one. I'm willing to be a minister, and I have the experience to do it, and I will do it if I'm elected. Point blank.
Thank you very much.
Moving on to the topic of cost of living, I know you've touched on it in certain areas already, or certain elements of it. So what proposals would you recommend to the new government to reduce the cost of living and to improve the quality of life for all residents in the Cayman Islands?
Boy, Mike, you hit me hard tonight. That's okay. That's fine. Thank you for the question. Cost of living, everybody's talking about it. This is a discussion on all these forums and on public meetings. First of all, I don't have the silver bullet. I don't have the answer to everything. What I will do, if elected, is I will work quickly to develop a think tank, a group of people who are going to, from the private sector and public sector and across society, who are going to look at all of the issues in relation to cost of living. That could include fuels, what kind of fuel we're using at CUC, alternative energy, the green technologies. I also will look at looking at options for renewable energy. Also, in relation to cost of living, the wages that people get is also important in terms of their ability to survive. How can you survive, West Bay West, on $6 per hour in our society? You can't do it at a minimum wage. We can look at increasing that and working at that right away. The review of our tariff code. There are certain things that are in our tariffs, in the customs law, that are duty-free, and these are luxury items, and it's done for a particular reason, because it's our tourism industry has been traditionally run by the merchant class. We've got to look at a tariff code and look at where things could be duty could be reduced or eliminated for certain things and increased in certain areas as well, such as removing it. The merchants, their markups. Now, when you get into price and wage control, that is a serious economic matter. But we need to look at what is reasonable. And the Chamber of Commerce through the Better Business Council, which I started when I was a manager, can play a role in that in terms of consumer protection and Better Business Bureau as well. The cost of fuel is critical because that impacts everything. And it impacts business, it impacts individuals. And so the cost of living is a huge topic. I'm going to look at a think tank or a task force to look at all the areas, including what I just pointed out. But looking at alternative sources of supply, we get a lot of our foodstuffs, for example, to Miami. A lot of that comes from places like Costa Rica and South America. When I was a Chamber of Commerce manager, we looked at trading with Costa Rica. Beautiful products, good prices, and all they had done is they sent to the U.S., repackaged, and sent to us at a markup. We got to look at alternative supply sources for foodstuffs, as well as our own backyard farming and local farming.
Thank you.
The next question is to get your position on the reopening of our borders. The tourism industry is an important pillar of the Cayman Islands economy, with many small tourism-related businesses suffering significantly as a result of the closure of our borders. So what are your views about the timeline for reopening the borders to stay over visitors?
Well, I thank the governor, the UK, the government for the work that's been done so far in protecting us from COVID. The people in the front lines are heroes. They're unsung heroes, the medical professionals and all others who are working on this matter. Opening of our tourism industry or economy, especially the tourism sector, has to be guided by science. We have to make sure that we're careful about it, because we know of countries, even some in our region, that have reopened and they've locked down again. So we need to be very careful. We're in a good spot here, and we got to be careful with it. We have to reopen safely. The vaccine program, as I mentioned, is right now going full steam ahead, and I want to encourage all of our citizens in West Bay West and across these islands to get vaccinated, because the quicker we can do that and create that herd immunity, the better off we're going to be. And so I think the percentage is something like 70, 75% of eligible individuals being vaccinated, and that's a good place to start. I also want to, while the tourism industry is still closed down the way it is, there's many people out there who are getting a displaced worker stipend of $1,500 a month from the government. I want to increase that to $2,000 a month, because people are appreciative of that, but they want a bit more because they're having a difficult time surviving without working. They want to get back to work, but they can't, and I'm going to increase that to $2,000 a month. But the thing that I want and will do is put together a plan. We have a great plan for lockdown. We have to have a plan to exit lockdown. And I'm not hearing anything about that plan. It's secretive if anything is happening. And we need to have a plan, bringing all the stakeholders together, and we need to do this thing properly with input. We have a lot of talent in this country. Let's use it. And we need to have an economic inspiration plan, not just a lockdown, but economic inspiration. And that's what I'm going to do if elected on April the 14th in terms of safely opening our economy to the outside world.
Well, thank you very much. We've gone through 10 questions now, so we're going to take a short commercial break. When we return, third round of questions with West Bay West candidate, Mr. Mario Ebanks. Please stay tuned. Welcome back to the Chamber of Commerce Candidates Forum for West Bay West. I'll now turn it back over to President of the Chamber, Mike Gibbs, for the next round of questions.
Thank you, Will. Mr. Ebanks, this first question is going to be focused on the area of labor reform. What is your view on the Department of Work and Immigration Systems and the current immigration system and its policies and procedures? What areas, if any, would you seek to address to encourage more Caymanian employment?
Yes, President Mike, this is an area that I have a lot of experience with, and I can offer a lot if elected or when elected. The current construct of the Department of Labor and pensions is really something that is lacking. We need to have a proper labor relations law. And a few years ago, we had a labor relations bill in circulation, and that got abandoned. But we need to look at a law that specifies and clarifies the role and responsibilities and rights of the employer and employee. And in addition to that, we need to have a labor commissioner or a judge to deal with labor tribunal matters. The labor tribunals is the appellate body that deals with labor disputes. And they hear disputes and resolve them, but they're all operated by volunteers. They depend on lawyers to serve as volunteers. And in my plan, I want to look at moving the labor tribunals to the commission secretariat and make it a part of that. So you have a separate area of labor tribunals and appeals tribunal under the commission secretariat. So the labor department will be labor and work, and I'll create a human capital development authority that brings labor, work, training, succession planning under one roof. And labor relations then will also be under that. Right now there's a disconnect between the two, and people it's not working. So we are going to reform that, and we're going to ensure that work, W-O-R-K, is actually working, W-O-R-K-I-N-G, because the current system is just a name change, but we need to have proper resources, laws and policies. This government has not said what the policy is that they have on training and development. We're going to do that, and we're going to create an authority to carry it out effectively. And if I'm elected, within 2 years, we're going to have an authority working, and we're going to have a combined system that is fit for purpose and helping our people.
Thank you.
Great. The next question is going to address environmental issues. What do you regard as the highest risk to the Cayman Islands' natural environment? And what measures would you recommend to address these risks?
The highest risk that I see is the government that is in now. And if I believe if they're re-elected, they're going to push through the cruise port in Hogstye Bay. I believe that without a proper environmental assessment, environmental impact assessment on that, and looking at our carrying capacity, we're going to destroy this country and what makes this country great and what makes this country prosperous. We have the conservation law that was passed, and the previous minister, Mr. Wayne Panton, was the minister then. It passed, and then the government backtracked on it. I think we need to look at that. We need to have a proper conservation law. We need to look at long-term. I talk about long-term planning. I talk about carrying capacity. I talk about managed growth. Without the environment, the Cayman Islands is like any other place. We're really threatened now. We have mangroves that are being destroyed. And mangroves really is what sustains our coast and keeps us safe. If we remove all our mangroves, we're going to just be washed away. And if we have a port in Georgetown with all the concrete and with the dredging in Hogstye Bay, we'll be washed away as well. We'll become a sea rather than an island. So we've got to look at long term. I believe that the environment is critical to our future, and I believe we have the plan. And that's why in Vision 2050, in my manifesto, environment is going to be a part of that. It's going to be critical to our future. And I believe that, as I said, the cruise port, the preserving 7 Mile Beach, preserving our coastline with proper buffer is critical to our future. And Vision 2050 and the think tank that I talked about will look at that, because we cannot have a future Cayman Islands going forward after COVID if we don't protect our environment. And I will protect the environment while at the same time being sensible to reasonable development.
Great. Thank you very much.
Thank
you. Changing directions a little bit now, more focusing on public safety. The question is, are you satisfied with the level of policing and public safety in the District of West Bay? What improvements, if any, would you advocate if elected?
Thank you, President Mike. The policing in West Bay and the policing in the Cayman Islands needs to be improved. But let's get this right. Police or teachers cannot take the place of parents parents have to be responsible for their children. If you bring in children into the world, you have to make sure that their children are taken care of and that they're disciplined. And you can't expect the police to solve all the problems, nor the teachers, nor the churches. I believe that community policing is important. We have a community relations officer in West Bay West, and in my neighborhood of Coral Gables. This gentleman is very attentive, but he's only one person, and we need to have a strategy. We have people, organizations like the Special Constables who go out there, and I know the past president Chris Duggan is a member of the Special Constable. They go out there and do work, and I think also that we need to ensure that they have equipment, that they have technology, they have access to assets that they can deploy quickly, and that people have confidence in them. We need to have the police officers that have the time and the interest to know their people, people will trust them, so that when they have complaints or intelligence, they feel safe to pass it on to the police. The police should not be driving by and seeing people committing a crime and not stop and at least talk to them. We don't want police to be out there like the Gestapo. We want them to be there to work with the community. And I think that in West Bay, I believe that we're happy in the sense that we feel that they're trying, but they don't have the resources. And that's why we should not be giving all of these concessions to large developers and leaving money on the table that could be used to provide resources and salaries and benefits to our police officers and those in law enforcement on the front lines.
Thank you.
The next question is addressing the matter of economic diversification. The financial services industry in the Cayman Islands continues to come under significant external pressures. And some people think that the tourism industry may never actually get back to pre-pandemic levels. With this in mind, what are your views about diversifying the economy, and which areas would you support and encourage with this diversification?
Yeah, Chris, I think that we have two industries, hospitality and financial services. And I spoke about tourism previously. But in financial services, I think one of the areas in our manifesto is that we're going to promote and protect the financial services industry. The Cayman Islands, as one of the world's first-class financial services centers, has done everything possible to comply with the EU, the OECD, the FATF, and all those international agencies. We set the stage. We're actually better than a lot of them, but yet they keep putting us on black lists and gray lists and white lists and all this stuff. We need to become much more proactive with selling our story, with communicating our story to the international media. We need to be proactive and assertive in telling the international entities like the EU and FATF and those what we're doing. I think we all know that they are jealous of the Cayman Islands. So we need to be smart, and we need to communicate our position. We need to be out there in all the media houses. We can't do it now because we can't travel, but we can do things electronically, and we can be present in the world in terms of promoting ourselves as a financial services industry. The economic substance legislation, for example, gives us the opportunity to create more opportunity locally for our people. And I am keen, under our new Human Capital Development Authority, that careers in the financial services industry, the Caymanians are given opportunities to reach their full potential. One of the things that I want to do under our plan is to create a national centralized data repository. What that means is that all the banks require you to give information, your electric bills and your due diligence stuff every year. Why can't we have one source for all that, and the banks can share that, confidentially, and we'll have a much more vibrant and a less red tape in our industry, but also comply with international best practice. Why can't we do that?
Right. Thank you.
And the last question of this particular segment focuses on affordable housing. And what strategies would you support or propose to ensure that there is affordable housing for residents in West Bay?
When I was in the Ministry of Community Development, I was there when the first government guaranteed home mortgage scheme was introduced. I was not the minister, my opponent was. I want to make that clear. But we introduced that scheme. I was the senior assistant permanent secretary for the ministry. I did a lot of work around that. In West Bay, we have a number of housing schemes. We have a place, Apple Blossom Village in the Birch Hill area. We have the Lighthouse Gardens. We have Frank Hall homes that have different developments in West Bay. And, you know, one of those developments, when my opponent was lead of government business, they brought in these prefab metal homes that they brought from wherever they got those from. And those are rusting away now in that area in Birch Hill. And that area is fantastic for development. We need to remove those homes and put proper homes down there. I believe also that in terms of affordable homes and affordable property, if the government can encourage large landowners, there are many Caymanians who have land, but they can't afford to develop it because they got to put in infrastructure, roads, utilities, and whatnot. Some of that property is in the backland without access. If government could provide incentives for those individuals to develop that land, they could sell property to Caymanians. Because what's going to happen otherwise is that big developers or big investors are going to come in and buy all that land, and then it'll never be within the reach of Caymanians. The other thing is that government perhaps could buy some land itself and develop it with infrastructure and make it available to Caymanians, young Caymanians, because right now you can't find a piece of property for less than $65,000. But if you have it where it's subsidized, it could work. The other area under my plan for housing is that the point system under the PR regulations provides points for people to own land and real estate. That is becoming a problem because the people who are applying for PR are taking up all that land, and the prices are going up, and young Caymanians are going to have it more difficult to purchase affordable land under the PR point system. So we're going to change that if elected.
Well, thank you again. We've gone through 15 questions. And so right now we're going to take another commercial break. And when we return, we're going to have the final round of questions for this evening. Please stay tuned. Welcome back to the Chamber of Commerce Candidates Forum for West Bay West with Mario Ebanks. Now I'm going to turn it over to Chris Duggan for the next round of questions.
Thank you, Will. So the next question is talking about sustainable development, and you've touched on a little bit of this already, but what is your definition of sustainable development? And would you support the development of a national plan for the Cayman Islands like Vision 2008?
Yes, thank you, Past President Chris. Sustainable development is a term that's defined, and it means that you develop today without compromising the opportunities for future generations. That's what sustainable development means. And it also encompasses carrying capacity, growth management, and the like. And so my plan, if elected or when elected, whatever you like, I prefer when, but I'm not going to be presumptuous, is to create a plan called Vision 2050. Vision 2050 is going to be an update to Vision 2008, where we are going to look at pulling together a cross-section of people from these wonderful 3 Cayman Islands. We've got so much talent in this country. People of different nationalities, cultures, and demographics who have a lot of talent, who want to be involved. We're going to pull people together. We're going to create a new vision, Vision 2050, that looks at the long term. And that plan will encompass all aspects of development, all aspects of the environment, culture, heritage, education, population, and everything else, where we have a shared common purpose, where everybody contributes. I've always believed in the proverb that if somebody writes something, they will underwrite it. If people are involved in developing something, they're gonna work and make sure that it's successful. In our plan, we're all about inclusion. My campaign is about ideas, solutions, and a better vision. And Vision 2050 is really a Vision 2020 because we're going to make it perfect. We're going to look at all of these aspects. We're going to involve people. We're going to be open-minded, but we're also going to preserve the core, but stimulate progress. We're not about shutting down or about making it more red tape. We want to make sure that investors are successful, but our people are protected and our people get something out of this development, because after all, that's what we do it for. Our people must have the benefit of development.
Great, thank you.
For the next question, we're focusing on the youth. And the question is, what do you regard as the top 2 issues facing our youth of today, and how do you intend to address these concerns if elected?
Our young people are feeling the pressure because they see a future where the stress and their opportunities are becoming squeezed, simply because we are rushing along in a headlong rush for a population of 100,000 people. We're looking at buildings rather than a system, or about building a country. We're looking at just concrete in terms rather than qualitative development. And so our young people, we have to give them hope. And if we allow them to become educated and to give them the foundation in the family where we're going to create parental support, you know, it's no secret that when you have a child who does not have parental support, that child is really off to a bad start. And we need to ensure that we give parenting skills. Parents are involved in the PTAs of their schools, and they're there for their children. The other area that I feel is a area for young people is scholarships and training. Young people are going off on scholarships, whether it's for local universities or overseas, but there's no shepherding of them to make sure that there's a plan for them when they return, that they have a job, and that somebody knows that they're even coming back. So looking at developing our people is critical, but ensuring that they have the support from the family and their parents, and giving them that support is critical. And that's why in our Family and Communities Empowerment Act that we will put forward, which is on our manifesto, talks about all of these areas and talks about looking at children who are at risk, those who have learning disabilities. And if you have learning disabilities, you're compromised. And we have to make sure that we detect those and provide the support for them to get over those disabilities and be able to reach their full potential.
Thank you.
The next question addresses constitutional reform. And again, I know you've touched a little bit on this already. So do you support constitutional reform, including the introduction of term limits for members of parliament and ministers, as well as a recall provision? And why or why not?
Thank you very much, Past President Chris. Tonight I have spoken about a number of big issues. I spoke about Vision 2050. I spoke about the Family and Communities Empowerment Act. I talked about the new Labour Relations Act. I talked about the Human Capital Development Authority. Now I want to talk to you about the Constitution. I support limited term. In our manifesto, I am proposing that we have a limited term of 20 years, or under the current construct of our Constitution, 5 terms of 4 years each. So 20 years is the maximum time that anybody can spend continuously without a break as a member of Parliament. Right now, you can go there, you can stay forever, you can stay long after you're useful, and we see that happening now. Under my plan, 20 years is the maximum. And right now we have a limited term for the Premier. The Premier can only serve 8 years or 2 terms, and then he or she has to take a break and maybe come back later if they can. But under my plan, we are going to have a limited term of 20 years. Recall, yes, I am all in favor. It's in my manifesto where there'll be a recall provision where it is triggered. A recall is where the citizens can recall or remove someone if they have the number, the triggering mechanism in terms of numbers of votes to recall someone, almost like a referendum. But we saw what happened last year when we had a member of Parliament who got into serious problems with the law, was charged, was convicted, pleaded guilty, and didn't appeal, but that individual is still allowed to remain as a speaker. Under my plan, if the Parliament doesn't want to do it, the citizens can recall that individual. But all of this has to be structured and strengthened by a proper code of conduct for parliamentarians, which spells out what is expected behavior. And once that is not complied with, goodbye, it's all over.
Thank you.
I was about to say shifting gears and then realised what the topic is, which is transportation. So it's a bit of a pun there, but significant development projects are underway or have been approved around Grand Cayman. What additional changes to roads or public transport systems would you like to see above the current road improvements already announced in public? Also, do you support placing a limit or restrictions on vehicle importation?
Good question. In our manifesto, we talk about implementing long overdue road corridors in the eastern districts and implementing other non-monetary or non-capital intensive traffic management strategies. When in the 36 years that my opponent has been a member of parliament or MLA, we had a number of road plans that came forward. One was called the Master Ground Transportation Plan, and that came about, I think, 1989 or thereabouts. And he and his friends caused that Master Ground Transportation Plan to be thrown away, put in the dump. We're paying the price today for not having corridors. And that plan, and when I was a Chamber of Commerce manager at that point, I pleaded for them to at least reserve the corridors for that Master Ground Transportation Plan, so that even though we couldn't build it in that year or the 5 years, we had it for the next 20, 25 years. They threw it all away, and we now have the problem of roads. We're a small country. We only have a certain amount of land that can be developed that's available for roads. We can't put roads everywhere. And even if we could, with the current importation of vehicles and the current strategies, we're going to get gridlock. So I believe that we need to look at some other strategies, carpooling, public transportation, staggered working hours, flex time, all those kind of things. But the restriction on importation of vehicles is certainly also a strategy that needs to be employed. And whether it means that you limit the amount of cars that one household can have or one family can have, or whether you increase the import duties so that you make it difficult for people to get more than one, you could say, well, the first car is at X% in the tariff code, but if you go to the second car, it's a higher one. Look, if we don't do it, may as well stay at home and walk to work in the morning, because it's gridlock. If you're coming from the eastern districts, it is terrible. West Bay is okay, but once you get all those properties developed in West Bay Road, you're going to be potentially gridlock again. So non-monetary as well as other strategies and reducing importation of cars, all should be in a mix for a proper transportation strategy.
Thank you.
Great. I've got the pleasure of asking the final question of this evening. Before I do, thank you again for joining us and for all of your answers this evening.
Thank you.
The subject is about the potential coalition administration following the election. Many candidates in this year's election have identified themselves as independents. If elected, would you be prepared to join a coalition group or party? And if yes, which of the declared political groupings thus far would you be willing to align yourself with?
I am an independent. I am self-funding my campaign, myself and my wife, and we are looking at what's best for this country. I am, as you probably know, I believe in ideology. I believe also in the party structure because it provides discipline and it provides openness. However, the current party structure has not worked. I was a member of the Progressives when my brother George actually got me into it in 2004, I think it was. And I rose to the first vice chairman of the Progressives until 2009, 2010. And I saw that it was not working, so I walked away. So, but I believe in the party apparatus. It has value. But I believe that the independents in this election, we have so many good independents, and we have people who are well-intentioned and they're bright and intelligent. And they can offer a lot. And I don't see any reason why the current group of independents working together cannot form a superior government for these islands. And you know, in terms of who I would align with, my preference would be looking at ideology. What do they stand for? And we got to look at their manifestos. People may say, well, if you're elected, you're going to have to form a government within a week. we're starting that process of discussing now and pulling together some groups to discuss. But one thing is for sure, that the current government and its alliance will be found lacking, in my opinion. But if I am elected, or when I am elected, I will work for this country. I will work on the front bench or the back bench, and I will work with an alliance, if that is the case, to be able to serve my country. But I believe that we can form a good and a superior government using the independence, and I am going to pursue that to the fullest, and soon you'll hear some more about it.
Well, thank you very much. We've concluded the question time for this evening, 4 rounds of questions. So right now we're going to take a short break, and when we return, Mr. Mario Ebanks will have closing statements, so please stay tuned. Welcome back to the Chamber of Commerce Candidates Forum for West Bay West. We've reached the stage this evening where we have closing remarks from our candidate. So over to you, Mr. Mario Ebanks.
Thank you. I want to invite the public of West Bay West to our public meeting tomorrow evening at 7 p.m. at the Club Inferno parking lot on Hell Road. We're going to have guest speakers. We're going to have a performance by a fine West Bayer, Rico Rolando. He's a singer and a homegrown Caymanian artist. We're going to have great discussions, refreshments. I want to invite the public to come out to that meeting tomorrow evening. It's a campaign rally, but it's going to be clean, no mud, only facts, ideas, solutions, and a better vision. I want to end by referring all of us to our Constitution, Constitution Order 2009, which in the preamble says as follows, that we affirm our intention to be a God-fearing country based on traditional Christian values, tolerant of other religions and beliefs. A country with an education system that prepares young people to assume leadership roles. A comprehensive healthcare system. A community protective of traditional Caymanian heritage and the family unit. A country that honors and acknowledges the important contribution of Caymanian women during the absence of the seafaring men. A country that manages growth and maintains prosperity while protecting its social and natural environment. A country that respects, protects, and defends the environment and natural resources as the basis of its existence. A country that fosters the highest standards of integrity. This, ladies and gentlemen, comes from our Constitution. And that's why I'm running in this election, because our Constitution needs to be in the guardianship of people who take it serious and who can deliver on those very noble requirements. Ladies and gentlemen, it's time for a new, prepared and experienced member of Parliament to represent you in West Bay West. It's time for you to elect someone who you can be proud of, someone who will be an exemplary role model, someone who will not embarrass you publicly or privately, someone who is going to be serving the people of West Bay West, fully representing you and fighting for your causes and the causes that are important to you. Our campaign looks at embracing the future challenges and solutions, preparing a lovely West Bay West and our beloved Cayman Islands for a dawning of a better future. West Bay West, you have a choice on April the 14th, but if you elect me, I can assure you that you will not regret it. You've tried the rest, now elect the best. That's me, Mario Ebanks, West Bay West. I appreciate your support. Thank you very much. God bless you, and God bless these Cayman Islands. And thank you for the Chamber of Commerce for this opportunity. Thank you.
I'll now turn the proceedings over to President of the Chamber, Mike Gibbs, for some closing remarks.
Thank you, Will. On behalf of the Chamber Council and staff, I would like to thank West Bay West candidate Mario Ebanks for participating in this evening's forum. And I trust that the forum will help voters in that constituency to determine who to vote for when you go to the polls on the 14th of April. I would also like to thank Foster's for their major sponsorship of the Chamber's candidate forums, as well as Affinity Recruitment, Bodden's Legal and Corporate, and DART. If you're interested in viewing more of the Growth Matters video series that have been playing during tonight's commercial breaks, they can be accessed at growthmatters.ky. Please join us tomorrow evening, Thursday, as we welcome Raoul Nicholson-Coe and Andre Ebanks from West Bay South. Thank you for tuning in, and I hope you will join us tomorrow evening at the same time. Good night.